And welcome to Unfiltered Vision News, bringing you the news unfiltered Monday through Friday, 7:30 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. Eastern. My name is Dr. Ashaki Noni Nichols, and I will be your host. And tomorrow will be our last 7:30 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. show. And then starting on Monday, we will go back to our regular 7 to 9 a.m. Eastern time slot. So thank you, everybody, for joining me here this morning. If you're joining from Facebook, YouTube, or X. And I was thinking a little bit this morning. I know you guys don't see like the little subscribe bells and buttons going across because my thing is this. If you're here watching, hopefully I'm doing a good job. I'm just saying. And if you want to subscribe, you subscribe. If you want to like, you like. And if you want to share, you share. But I just wanted to thank everybody for joining me this morning. We are over 400 subscribers. I'm really excited. Definitely looking forward to that, to get monetized on YouTube and continue to bring you content and just news that you can use actually in your life, right? It's kind of interesting when you actually get information that you can apply. That's what I really try to bring you guys. So with that, let's get to our Kids Corner.
Everything a kid could dream of. His latest gift? A golden smartwatch that could talk. But he didn't know this watch would change him forever. One bright morning, Vion wore his watch to school. He thought it made him better than others. But pride has a funny way of teaching lessons we don't expect. Suddenly, the watch beeped and said, "Being first means nothing if you're not kind." Vion laughed, but those words stuck in his head like a quiet echo. One afternoon, Vion saw a boy drop his lunch and cry. For once, he didn't check his watch. He gave his own food. Something warm grew in his heart. Later, Vion asked his watch, "Why me?" The watch answered, "You gave time, not just gold. That's real richness." Vion finally understood what it meant to be truly great. Now Vion wears his watch, but to count moments of kindness. He learned the best gift is not what shines on your wrist, but what glows in your heart. A shiny gift fades with time, but kindness stays forever. Use your time wisely, not to show off, but to lift others. That's what makes you truly rich.
Yeah, and that is a good thing, right? Not just to show off, but to use it to help others. And with that, let's get into our morning prayer, which is to honor God with our body. God, please guard our mind and thoughts. God, help me fix my thoughts on what is true and honorable and right and pure and lovely and admirable. So I will think about things that are excellent and worthy of praise. God, please protect my ears and help me listen to your voice. God, help me to be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. God, please protect my eyes from sin's damage. God, I make a covenant with my eyes not to look lustfully. God, please speak life over my mouth. God, set a guard over my mouth. Lord, keep watch over the doors of my lips. God, please help my hands to serve generously. God, help me to do good to everyone, and especially to those who belong to our family in the faith. God, please protect my reproductive organs and help me to honor you with purity. God, help me to honor you with my body. And God, please protect my feet as I walk along your path. God, let your word be a lamp for my feet and a light on my path. And we definitely pray this prayer daily to remind us to truly honor God with our bodies. And so, with that, we're going to get into our first article. Now, this is the Black Panthers. And I know there has been other Black Panther groups, and then there'll be people to speak against it. I played a video earlier this week. I guess the one Black Panther party, they were just like, yeah, we don't want ICE here. We want them out of town. And now the actual Black Panther party is showing up saying something completely different. So let's check this out.
For illegals, we're not gonna step in front of that. That's not our fight. That has nothing to do with us. We're not gonna step into that fight and going through the community defending somebody that we didn't even want to be here.
Yeah. Okay. Plain and simple, short and sweet. Those are the actual Black Panthers. Because, like I was saying, you know, Black Panthers have been about law and order, and then specifically teaching the Black community about their Second Amendment rights, First Amendment rights, constitutional rights overall, making sure that children were eating, right, that they had their breakfast and lunch, and making sure they were getting good grades, doing their homework, community outreach if people needed jobs. I mean, they were more of a community service group. But unfortunately, under COINTELPRO, when our federal government, yes, our own federal government, saw that they were being successful, they infiltrated the group and tried to make sure that the group was demonized and classified as a terrorist organization, which it's not. Okay. And so, you know, with earlier in this week, with showing the other persons saying, oh, we're the Panther Party and we, you know, don't want ICE here. And you're doing all these illegal things. You're doing everything in opposition to what the Black Panther Party, the original Black Panther Party, actually stood for. So I'm kind of glad that this is happening because you can kind of see the difference in the separation. And as some are saying, the delineation from groups that are acting out in illegal ways. That is something that the Black community is trying to make sure it's like, no, we're not going to do things that are illegal. You know, there are a lot of Black people who have left the Democratic Party because they're like, we're not doing things that are illegal. And I'm not saying that they're running to the Republican Party either. They're not. But they're definitely leaving the Democratic Party, and that's why the Redemption Party is here. So shameless plug, but yes, check out the Redemption Party at usaredemptionparty.com. And so on to our next video. Now, I came across this one. This is Jimmy Dore, and I watch him every once in a while, but I found this one curious because it was talking about TP USA, which I found really fascinating. I was like, But I actually, I skipped over an article. We got to go to this article first. There was another article that I came across. So many, right? But this one kind of breaks down what's happening with Don Lemon. And I did show some videos this week on the show of him entering that church. And then there's another video floating around, like a before and after of him kind of showing and, being with the group before and then showing afterwards him saying, oh, I'm not affiliated with them at all. I'm like, bro, the internet is forever. He's got himself in a mess, but now it's looking at, did he violate in the Klan Act of 1870? Now I find that fascinating because he's always talking about Black history and white supremacy and all these things. Wouldn't it be ironic if he actually violated an act that was put in place to protect people from the Klan, and he himself is actually in violation of this law? Let's see.
And anchor Don Lemon has been warned by the Justice Department over allegations he joined a swarm of anti-ICE protesters who burst into a Minnesota church in the middle of Sunday service and accused a pastor of working with ICE.
Our resistance protesters, they're planning an operation that we're going to follow them on. I can't tell you exactly what they're doing, but it's called Operation Pull Up. And it's Takima Armstrong, and she has been doing this since George Floyd, Dante Wright, and others, where they surprise people, catch them off guard, and hold them to account. What do you think of this?
I mean, this is unacceptable. It's shameful. It's shameful to interrupt a public gathering of Christians in worship.
But there were folks who will say,
I have to take care of my flock.
Okay, but listen, we live in there's a Constitution and the First Amendment to freedom of speech and freedom to assemble and protest.
Yeah. We're here to worship. We're here to worship Jesus because that's the hope of these cities. That's the hope of the world is Jesus Christ.
I said, how did I become the face of this? And my producer said, Don, you're a gay Black man in America.
Don Lemon has officially achieved the impossible. He is so dumb that he's managed to violate a law written to stop the Ku Klux Klan. Let's talk about it. Here's a quick message from this video sponsor, ZocDoc. This law isn't new. It was passed May 31st, 1870, literally 156 years ago. Now, Congress passed this law specifically to stop the Ku Klux Klan from riding out in the night and terrorizing freed slaves. Now, in the South, you'd have a whole bunch of armed white men throw on hoods and go to black churches, kick everybody out, and burn down the building. Sometimes they'd burn down the building while leaving everyone in the building. So Congress had enough of that and decided to pass this law. Now, what the act does, it makes it a federal crime for two or more people to conspire to injure, oppress, threaten, or intimidate any person in the free exercise or enjoyment of any right or privilege secured to them by the Constitution. And in this particular case, we're talking about your First Amendment right to exercise your religious preference. So, simply put, if you get together with a whole bunch of people and go to a church to interrupt their religious services, you are committing a federal crime and can serve up to 10 years in prison. Now, for you to be convicted of this crime, there are 4 elements the government has to prove. It has to prove, number 1, a conspiracy, an agreement between 2 or more persons to do this thing. Next, they got to show that you had the specific intent to injure, oppress, threaten, or intimidate. The victims have to be a person within the United States, and the right has to be something that's constitutionally protected, like your freedom of religion. So let's go through the elements. Is there a conspiracy, an agreement between 2 or more persons? Here's what Don Lemon says.
So the American flag or whatever, but these are resistance protesters. They're planning an operation that we're going to follow them on. I can't tell you exactly what they're doing, but it's called Operation Pull Up. And it's Takima Armstrong, and she has been doing this since George Floyd, Dante Wright, and others, where they surprise people, catch them off guard, and hold them to account. And so that's what we're doing here. And then after we do this operation, you'll see it live. And these operations are surprise operations. Again, I can't tell you where they're going.
So it seems like there is a clear agreement between 2 or more people on what they're going to do, how they're going to do it, where to meet up, and where they are going. So Don Lemon knows where they're going, what they're about to do, and how they're about to do it, right? They're going to confront some people. Don Lemon then admits more of the conspiracy.
They're getting the operation together. Again, this is an operation that is a secret, that they invited folks out. Can't tell you what is going to happen, but you're going to watch it live unfold here on the Don Lemon Show. There are for this reason, it may look like MAGA coded, but there's a reason they have so many white people here. I'm just going to be honest. It's because of the operation that they're doing today. It's important to have allies, as they said, white allies here. So that is what I could say. I turned the camera off of them because they're giving some critical information here. But there we go. Everybody's ready to go.
So it seems like we got 2 or more people in a conspiracy to do something. So next we're talking about specific intent. Does Don Lemon have any evidence that there's any specific intent to injure, oppress, threaten, or intimidate whoever they're going to go and confront?
Operation Pull Up, more of a clandestine operation. We show up somewhere that is a key location. They don't expect us to come there, and then we disrupt business as usual.
So now they make it very clear that wherever they're going there to disrupt, which to me sounds like injure, oppress, threaten, or intimidate. How else do you disrupt? So I think we have our first 2 elements pretty clear here. We have a conspiracy, an agreement between 2 or more people, and we have the specific intent to disrupt, which to me sounds like injure, oppress, threaten, or intimidate someone. But now we get to find out where they're going to disrupt.
Okay, so we are here. Now, do you think if you just have it, I think maybe if you just have it on the church, but if they see me, they're gonna know. No?
It just depends.
What?
Don't name the location.
I'm not naming the location, but I mean, I'm just wondering if you see me. The folks inside see me.
Are the congregants really on live instead of in service right now?
No, but they'll be like, "Why is Don Lemon here?"
Sunday morning. Sunday morning church.
Yeah. Okay, we'll see.
They'll be like, he's. Well, what else? It's Sunday, and we already said the church.
No, we didn't.
Yes, you said it.
No, I didn't. No, I did not.
So now we know they're at a church, and in that church are a whole bunch of U.S. citizens. So that satisfies element 3, where we're talking about the victim is a person in the United States or its territories. But now, the right. What right are they about to violate? Well, Don Lemon makes it very clear that they're about to interrupt these people exercising their First Amendment right to worship the way they want.
They're in the middle of the church. So in the beginning of the church service, the pastor was speaking, and Nakima stood up and said her piece, and then the protesters surrounded her. But this is a clandestine mission. I think they found out one of, according to them, this is according to Operation Pull-Up, that one of the pastors here is a member of ICE. And so here we go.
You could talk to the lead pastor.
Yeah.
Let me show you.
Now, to make it absolutely clear, Don Lemon talks to the pastor to confirm that what they were doing was exercising their freedom of religion because they were there to worship Jesus, and they are now being intimidated.
Here to worship Jesus because that's the hope of these cities. That's the hope of the world is Jesus Christ.
I want to be very respectful. Please don't push me, though.
We're here to worship Jesus.
Yes.
That's why we're here.
Yeah.
Okay. That's why we're here. Okay. That's what we're about.
Don't you think Jesus would be understanding
we're about
and love these folks?
We're about spreading the love of Jesus.
But did you try to talk to them as a Christian?
No one is willing to talk.
Okay.
I have to take care of my church and my family, so I asked that you actually would also leave this building.
You don't want us to chronicle what happened?
Unless you're here to worship.
I'm always worship. I'm a Christian.
We're here to worship.
Yeah.
We're here to worship. Okay.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Now, to even make it more clear that people in that church were intimidated, here is Don Lemon's account of people crying in the corner.
And there are people here who are, I'm looking at a young man who's in the corner. He's frightened. He's scared. He's crying. People are leaving church.
All these comfortable white people who are living lavish, comfortable lives while children are dragged into concentration camps. You're living real life, nice lives with your lattes, doing absolutely nothing for your Latino and Somali brothers and sisters. You come here to a man wearing a suit. Is a preacher? Did Jesus wear a suit? Did Jesus profit off the words? No. Jesus would die with English. Do not touch me. Touch me again and see what happens.
Hey, you can't.
You are a fake Christian. Why are you not standing with your Somali and Latino communities? Why do I not see you out at Whipple every day protesting this attack on humanity? Where are you? You're sinners. You're pretending to be Christians. But we know you live an easy life, don't you? A very easy life while people are starving. Shame.
Now, one thing you have to also understand, if you're saying, hey, Don Lemon didn't do anything, he was just there observing. He knew what their intentions were. He helped plan things out. Well, I'll say this. Even if Don Lemon didn't know that any of that other stuff, like the intimidation, was going to happen, he can still be held criminally liable for his other co-defendants' actions. Like this particular guy.
Yesterday, I went into a church with Nakima Armstrong and I protested these white supremacists. The pastor of the church is a f***ing ICE leader in the city. How can you be a f***ing pastor and be a f***ing ICE agent? Fuck them. They want to come after me. How can they live so comfortably while the people from Somalia that are in this country legally, that have citizenship, can't even go to their mosque and pray? How do they deserve any different?
So, as you heard, the pastor said we're worshiping God, asked them to leave. They refused to leave. So now what do you do? To me, it seems like all four of these elements have at least been spoken to, but it's going to be up to you to determine if they've been satisfied beyond a reasonable doubt. So now, with all four elements seemingly satisfied, the DOJ says, we're going to be coming after you. Here is the Assistant Attorney General for the Civil Rights Division of the United States of America explaining what are the possible charges they intend to bring against Don Lemon and his co-conspirators.
See various crimes that have occurred. Exactly what they are, I'm not going to flag, but the FACE Act has been mentioned as one of the predicates there. In other cases, the Biden DOJ used the Klan Act conspiracy charges tacked on to the FACE Act in the case of protests outside abortion clinics to bring much longer sentences. So there are a number of tools available to us. Who funded this? What else? What other crimes may have occurred? Was there a use of the wires or the mails in preparing for this event? Did anyone cross state lines to do this? All of those are potential predicates for additional federal charges.
Okay, so you guys got to see the irony in this. A law passed to stop the Ku Klux Klan from bothering black people is now going to be employed against BLM and Don Lemon. But my question to you, you know the elements, you've seen the evidence. Do you think Don Lemon has a problem? Now, if I was Don Lemon, I would be getting all my ducks in a row because it seems like they may be coming after me because he's documented everything. Now, with that being said, don't forget, like, share, subscribe.
Yeah. That's the other part. It's like you've documented your own demise, everything. And people have recorded the footage. They've shared the footage multiple times on the internet, spliced some of it together to give a before and after because you were crying about how, you weren't a part of this and this, that, and the other. And then there's other videos showing how you were there before the meeting, explaining that there were some things you couldn't even put on air because they were planning. I mean, this is just sad. Truly, truly sad. So with that, now let's get to the article that I wanted to share with you in regards to TPUSA. And I found this one fascinating because, obviously we do have a First Amendment right. People have the right to, as I'm doing right now, I'm sharing articles with you, just sharing, general information with you guys, to help you, kind of know what's going on in the world. But apparently, TPUSA has an issue with certain YouTubers and certain people talking on platforms about the organization.
Was about asking questions. And now Turning Point is sending out legal letters to small YouTube channels accusing them of defamation for asking questions.
So do you remember this guy?
Yes.
So this guy is from the Wolves in Finance podcast and Twitter account. And he's exposed a lot of fraud that appears to be going on inside TPUSA and all their shell companies.
Also, Tim Waltz before that fake Shirley kid. This guy had a whole great thing on Tim Waltz's skullduggery.
So he's exposing that they're sending millions of dollars to a UPS mailbox at a strip mall, and they're trying to pretend like this is normal. And they got all the money moving in and out. And and it seems like Charlie caught on to this. And that's why he ordered a Doge-style accounting effort inside TPUSA.
Be specific.
And then 8 days later, he was killed. So this guy's been exposing all this, and we've showed it to you before. Well, guess what? TPUSA is so stupid, and they're so bad at what they're doing, which is covering up stuff. They're so bad at it that they tried to intimidate him. They had a legal letter sent to him, and let's listen.
Turning Point states in the letter, Turning Point entities are not looking for litigation. Rather, their interest is in the truth and making sure the public record is accurate. So they are claiming they do not want to sue me. But I view this letter as a threat to sue, and I think any reasonable business person would do the same. A cease and desist letter is the first step towards a defamation lawsuit. I interpret this letter as Turning Point telling me to shut my mouth or they're going to sue me. I do not understand what Erica Kirk is doing. Out of the hundreds of people posting on social media about...
I don't think she understands what she's doing either, because obviously she's a product of MK Ultra and had her mind wiped a long time ago.
Yeah. Also, she's not in charge of it. She's the figurehead.
She's right.
The person in charge doesn't put on a sparkly suit and shoot fireworks off.
That's right. 5 minutes after her husband was assassinated.
Yeah, that's the dancing monkey's got to do that after they kill her husband.
Turning Point. Why? Out of the hundreds of people posting on social media about Turning Point, why are they targeting me?
Why? Because he's over the target. That's why. Because he's really uncovered something. That's why.
Yeah, those P.O. box.
That's right.
Why are they so worried about what I am saying that they're sending me legal letters? I am one of the smallest YouTube channels in my market segment. Who do they think I am? I'm a working accountant with a small YouTube channel. I have no money. I have no power. I have no influence. I don't know how much money they think they're going to get from suing me. All I have is the truth. And I'm not going to stop speaking the truth because Erica Kirk doesn't like it. The one good thing about a lawsuit is that everything will be out in the open, and Turning Point will quickly find out that I have nothing to hide. The letter came from a lawyer named Paul Edgar Harold from South Bend, Indiana.
I'm going to guess they're not sending their best.
Yeah. Have you ever seen Not a Pedophile face, Jimmy? That's it.
Oh,
He's not a pedophile.
No.
Named Paul
That's the
Edgar
face.
Harold from South Bend, Indiana. It seems like this is Turning Point's lawyer. I looked him up, and I cannot find that he has been admitted to the State Bar of Arizona in order to practice law in Arizona, so I'm not exactly sure how he's going to sue me in Arizona, but maybe he's working with other lawyers. In the letter, they order me to, please confirm that you will publicly correct your false statements immediately. This is not what I was going to talk about this week, but Turning Point is demanding that I communicate their statements publicly. So here we go.
Here we go.
They include a whole list of statements they claim are false that I have made in my videos about Turning Point. Now, I'm not interested in spreading false information. So I'm glad that Turning Point reached out to me because if I said something wrong, I am happy to correct it. So let us go through the statements where they have a problem. And you're going to want to hear this because some of these are wild. On November 16th, I posted a video called Bombshell, Did Turning Point USA Commit Fraud? They say these are false claims. Charlie Kirk ordered a Doe-style audit that was never conducted. Here's my first problem with this letter. They do not include the actual quote that I said in the video. This is a paraphrased statement of what I said, and they are saying that the paraphrased statement is a lie. You have to tell me exactly what I said that was supposedly a lie. And they do this through the whole letter. So my request to this lawyer in future letters, because I'm assuming there's going to be more, please include the actual quote that I said so that I can respond to your accusation. But I'm going to at least try to interpret what they are saying. I spoke in my video about a memo that Charlie Kirk wrote 8 days before he was murdered. In the cease and desist letter, they say, indeed, Turning Point USA's COO announcement concerning the Doge effort never used the word audit. So this is breaking news. Turning Point's attorney has now confirmed that the Charlie Kirk memo is authentic. We now have legal confirmation this did happen. It seems like their problem with my video is that I called it a Doge audit, when in the memo it is written as Doge effort. So they want everyone to use the word effort and not use the word audit. This letter is seriously hurting my head. Whatever word you use, the memo is clearly talking about an evaluation of Turning Point. But we cannot use the word audit, we have to call it an effort, or they are going to sue you. The letter goes on to say, the announcement makes clear that Turning Point USA was doing what it has always pledged to donors, ensuring it was being efficient with its funds and time and making changes to foster greater efficiencies. Moreover, Turning Point USA hires a third-party audit firm to conduct an audit every year. This is all just their opinion. This is how they are interpreting Charlie Kirk's memo. They think that Charlie Kirk wrote this memo, and they think it means that they do not have to do anything. How convenient. They think that Charlie Kirk wrote a memo just to tell people to keep doing business as usual. Well, my opinion, and the opinion of many other people, was that Charlie Kirk's memo meant something different. This is not a statement of fact, it is an opinion. This is another problem I have with this letter. Most of the statements they mention are opinions, just like this one. If you are going to accuse me of defamatory statements, they need to be facts, not opinions. If I have a fact wrong, let me know, and I will happily correct it. But I will not change my opinion of this memo to whatever you want. But since it is so important for Turning Point, I have no problem with specifying that Charlie Kirk's memo used the words Doge effort, not Doge audit. The next statement is, someone at Turning Point decided not to file 990 forms. At the time I made that video, those forms were not publicly posted. Those forms were posted after I made that video, and I have already made a correction about that. The next statement is, in 2023, $650,000 may have been funneled from Turning Point USA through Turning Point Action to Turning Point PAC to evade campaign finance restrictions. They are referencing this chart from my video. They claim money actually went from Turning Point Action to Turning Point USA as a reimbursement for event expense. There was nothing nefarious about that transfer. I'm not sure they are contradicting what I am saying. According to their own statement, Turning Point USA used their own donor funds to pay for an event on behalf of Turning Point Action, freeing up Turning Point Action funds, which they then transferred to Turning Point PAC. They are saying that later, Turning Point Action reimbursed Turning Point USA for that event. But that doesn't change what I was saying. Additionally, in my video, I specifically said, again, this is not necessarily illegal if they structure their transactions correctly and utilize campaign finance loopholes, but it certainly looks unethical.
Yeah.
That is my opinion. This money did move between the organizations. I'm allowed to have my opinion. On November 30th, I posted a video called Explosive, More Fraud at Turning Point USA. They say these are false claims. There was more fraud at Turning Point USA. I assume they are referring to the title of the video here. They, of course, are saying that there is no fraud at Turning Point USA. The content of the video is me going over the evidence of fraud and sharing my opinion. Now, technically, a true statement would be that no one has been convicted of fraud at Turning Point USA, but whether fraud is going on right now is an opinion. This is what happens in every criminal court case. Both sides look at the facts. One side gives their opinion that they are innocent. The other side gives their opinion that they are guilty. Turning Point is looking at the financials and claiming that they are innocent. I understand that. I'm looking at the same financials and thinking they look suspicious. I did not even say in my video that they committed fraud. I think I'm very fair and balanced when I say, now for legal reasons, I have to say that I do not have any evidence of a crime. We would need an investigation of the books at Turning Point to know for sure. What I am saying is that there are red flags in the financials at Turning Point and a lot of questions that need to be answered. That sounds to me to be pretty fair and balanced, and the complete opposite of what they are accusing me of saying. They cannot take my statements out of context and accuse me of defamation. I have the right, as a journalist, to report on Turning Point's financials. Their opinion that they have not committed fraud is just an opinion. My opinion is that it looks suspicious. Now, it is nice that we have this letter with their official statements, but the letter does nothing to change my suspicions. It does not address most of my questions. Instead of answering my questions, it is the precursor to a lawsuit unless I change my statements. That does nothing to reduce my suspicions. For the sake of avoiding miscommunication, I can change the title of the video if that makes them more happy. I already changed it from More Fraud at Turning Point USA to More Fraud at Turning Point USA, allegedly. The next statement is that America's Turning Point had ghost employees. The letter explains, America's Turning Point had 80 employees in FY23 and 108 in FY24. There was, however, an inadvertent error in America's Turning Point filing, which failed to note these employees, and America's Turning Point is in the process of rectifying that inadvertent error. So I was right. There was something wrong. They did put incorrect information on the 990 form.
Yes.
There were missing employees they were not reporting. They have confirmed it. And just to be clear, this was not some minor mistake. This was around 80 employees that were somehow missing. Their complaint is that it's not correct to use the term ghost employees. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that opinion, but that is their position. I find this incredible.
Incredible.
How are they going to sue me for this? They admit that I am right, that the employees were not reported correctly. They don't like the wording I used. How is that defamatory? The next statement is that donations to Turning Point Action increased from $10.7 million in FY23 to $27.2 million in FY24, and suggested that Tyler Boyer may have been recruiting these donors away from Turning Point USA to undermine MAGA and benefit himself. Again, this is not exactly what I said, and I find their paraphrasing of my statements a little silly. They are claiming that Tyler Boyer never tried to undermine Charlie Kirk in any of his decisions. Tyler Boyer never tried to benefit himself in his role at Turning Point. I find those claims a little excessive. What I actually say in my video was sharing my opinion on the financials, which I'm allowed to do. When you see Tyler Boyer's organization growing so much faster than Charlie Kirk's organization, that looks to me like a corporate takeover from the inside. That is my opinion, which I'm allowed to have. Now, of course, I cannot know what is going on inside Tyler Boyer's mind, but that's not what I said in my video. I was not speaking about his state of mind or his motivation. I do not know that. The letter goes on to explain that donors naturally direct more money towards election activities in election years, especially to organizations like Turning Point Action that can engage in lobbying and political activity during election years. Accordingly, you are wrong to assert that the increased donations to Turning Point Action evinced any sort of wrongdoing on Mr. Boyer's part. So their explanation is that all the changes in the financials can be explained by the election. That is their official explanation. I do not believe it, and that is my opinion. On December 7th, I posted a video called Top 10 Clowns of the Year. In this video, I called Turning Point my #1 clown of the year. I talked about the now infamous interview with Turning Point's chief security person talking about the day that Charlie Kirk was murdered. I point out the massive contradiction where he says they were not allowed to fly drones. Then I show the interview with Frank Turek where he says he was watching drone footage with Charlie Kirk. This part is breaking news because I'm not aware this has ever been discussed. The lawyer in this letter says the following. There was no discrepancy. UVU prohibited Turning Point USA from flying drones for security purposes during the event, but did allow a Turning Point USA media production drone to briefly fly over the location before the event to collect limited B-roll footage.
So you're telling me
what?
That they allowed a drone flight just for BS B-roll media coverage, but they wouldn't allow a drone flight for security?
And you, as security, accepted that from them and just didn't break that rule because that's insane. And I thought your $1 million security, Epstein's $1 million security did everything he wanted. And
First of all, how could this be defamatory if I had no idea about any of this? Second, I find this explanation absurd. You are telling me that the security team was not allowed drones, but the media team was? That is the official explanation from Turning Point's lawyer. My honest opinion is I do not believe that. But if that did happen, that is really silly, and it may have cost Charlie Kirk his life. On December 14th, I posted a video called Tim Pool Rants about Turning Point. They say these are false claims. Asking whether money sent to 110 LLC was to bribe Jake Hoffman. Again, that's not exactly what I said. They are complaining that I'm not allowed to ask questions. I cannot ask questions about 110 LLC. I cannot ask questions about Jake Hoffman. I think those are fair questions to ask, given that Turning Point sends them millions of dollars as one of their largest independent contractors. This is America. I'm allowed to ask questions. But I think it is fair for Turning Point to also state their official position. They claim Turning Point contracts with 110 LLC for legitimate services. The money you ask about is spent on marketing and advertising services.
So you saw that UPS mailbox there? That's the company that TPUSA is sending millions of dollars to. That mailbox. That's the mail. And that's supposed to be this marketing plan. That's what it's all be. It's a marketing company running out of a mailbox at a UPS strip mall.
What's wrong with that? Any claim that's a bribe is false. It's just a normal transfer of funds in a PO box.
And I will post the link to the rest of that video. But I just find it interesting because now, things are coming out and other people are asking questions outside of Candace Owens. And Candace is interesting on this. But outside of Candace Owens, people are asking questions about TPUSA. And I think a lot more is going to come out. Now, this next article I'm going to get into, I was asked a question yesterday. Had I covered this yet? And I had come across it, but I actually hadn't covered it. So I wanted to share this with you guys.
So the former Venezuelan head of intelligence and former three-star general to Hugo Chavez and Maduro, the narco leaders, just wrote a letter to President Trump where he said many wild things, including how Venezuela has been involved in rigging American elections. But after doing some digging, turns out that Lou Dobbs reported on this back in 2006.
A firm owned by Venezuela could be allowed to take over one of this country's top voting machine firms. Venezuela, of course, led by Hugo Chavez, working to change the views of most South American countries, moved to the left. Critics of the deal say our nation's very democracy is now for sale without anyone doing a thing about it. Giddy Pilgrim reports.
The use of some 19,000 electronic voting machines in the city of Chicago and Cook County primary on March 21st of this year is now under intense scrutiny. The U.S. company that makes the machines, Sequoia, was bought in 2005 by Smartmatic, a private company primarily owned by Venezuelan businessmen. When Chicago had problems with the machines, a dozen Venezuelan employees were there to help with the election. Chicago officials are outraged.
I think that American elections ought to be run by American companies and ought to be run by American citizens, not Venezuelan nationals.
Smartmatic is technically based in Boca Raton, Florida, but the president of the company, Jack Blaine, testified to the Chicago City Council. Fewer than a dozen Smartmatic employees work in Florida. The majority of the workers are based in Venezuela. Watchdog groups question why U.S. voting machines would be under the control of citizens of another country, especially a country whose own election process is highly suspect.
We believe this is a national security issue. There is no way that companies belonging to non-U.S. corporations should have access to our elections.
The Treasury Department is supposed to monitor sales of U.S. companies to overseas investors where there is a question of national security. Some in Congress are demanding an investigation.
In the case of Smartmatic, there are a number of unanswered questions. That's why I wrote to the Secretary of the Treasury and asked them to review the ownership. It's offshore, it's murky, no one seems to know who owns it. Certainly our government should know.
A potential risk to the democratic process. Now, we called the Treasury Department to ask if the sale of Sequoia in 2005 had been reviewed or not. Treasury told us they were aware of the sale, but can't confirm if it's been reviewed or not.
This goes beyond narcoterrorism. It's a declaration of war.
Wow. 2000 and technically between 2005 and 2006, this was happening. So close to 20 years ago. So people calling out and saying, hey, things are fraudulent. Things don't look right with these machines. And then on top of that, you've got governors who and secretaries of state, like I live here in Georgia, saying, oh, we need to use these machines and trying to make it statewide to where everybody's using the machines. Yeah. Right now, cities and counties, they still do have a choice of how they, process their elections at the, at the local level. But still, they are still trying to get everybody on this one system of machines. And this is why people are crying out for paper ballots. This is why. Because see, with the paper ballot, there shouldn't be any fraud, but we have to make sure there's no ballot stuffing, right? And that they don't try to abuse the absentee voter process, right? Because people just like to cheat. They do. This is how they stay, quote unquote, in power and win elections, and it's disgusting. And I think there needs to be a real infiltration and investigation where there has been major fraud in specific cities that we know of, or certain cities allegedly, and make sure that we're moving people from the Board of Elections offices who have been involved in fraud, committed fraud, or have the potential to commit fraud, and making sure that our elections are free, fair, and safe. And with that, we're going to take a short break. And when we return, we're going to look into what's been going on at Davos, some remarks from President Trump and from his administration that are currently there. So thank you so much for joining me here on Unfiltered Vision News, and I will see you on the other side.
A life empowered is closer than you think. We're all looking for a better way. Reimagine what's next with a new sense of exuberance. Why not power on like you mean it? Or power off blissfully? A better sleep is a better awake. You've never moved like this before. Energy nature intended. Imagine reprogramming the way you look at the speed of science. At longevity. At exhilaration. It's next level rejuvenation. Take your well-being from the inside out and outside in. The light within is ready to ignite. Be the light. LifeWave.
Begin your day with intellectual peace, awakening surrounded by blossoms that reflect tranquility and comfort. Carry confidence through bustling streets and focused work sessions. Let the calm of intellectual peace guide you, keeping you poised and serene. Reclaim comfort in the evening. Relax and rejuvenate as blossoms gently remind you of peace. With intellectual peace, everyday blossoms. Discover
peacepads.net.
And we are back. Thank you so much for joining me here on Unfiltered Vision News, bringing you the news unfiltered Monday through Friday, 7 to 9 a.m. Eastern, currently 7:30 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. Eastern here. And my name is Dr. Ashaki Noni Nichols, and I will be your host. And I just wanted to throw in that advertisement for Peace Pads, which is founded by our brother Riza Islam. And you can check out Peace Pads at peacepads.net or peacepads.org. And I'll make sure to link that in the repost of the stream. And it's very important, we don't think about, I no longer, have my cycle. I'm kind of a fixed person. But for young women out there, it is very important to really look at the products and the ingredients in those products and making sure that they're safe, right? Because there's so many things that we have to look at. Like, we were looking at things by Bill Gates yesterday and just making sure that people are healthy, right? And making sure that the products that are on the market are keeping us healthy. So, with that, there were a few things that Donald Trump talked about yesterday. I'm going to get into his speeches, but I wanted to point out something that he did, and I didn't know if you guys were aware of this. It's been, I want to say it's been something on the table, right, that he's talked about, but has it really moved forward? Well, here we are. He's moving it. So apparently, he has stopping Wall Street from competing with Main Street home buyers. Now, this has been a large discussion that everybody's been having. I think, in essence, a lot of people, when they were having this discussion, they were like, okay, we know the BlackRock and Vanguard, we know they're buying up all the properties, but what is it going to look at to make them stop buying these properties? Because what happened was they artificially inflated these properties, artificially inflating everything else. But like I said, Donald Trump says a few things in the clips I'm going to show. But the one thing that he brought up that I thought was fascinating is he says, corporations, when they were buying up these homes, they could actually depreciate the houses. And, with business, depreciating basically means you can write off the property, right? And what it does is it lowers your taxable income because it's a write-off. And he was like, home buyers can't do that. And they're fighting to stay in their homes, but they don't get the benefit of depreciation, right? So I don't think that's going to be written into this. I don't think, unfortunately, that home buyers are going to get that benefit. But what I do hope is that we get to a point where, we're not paying property taxes, especially if you bought your house, you should not have to pay property taxes. Now, for other city, what do you call it? City agencies like your fire department or your police department, or, and if you don't have any kids, you shouldn't even be paying for school. Why are you, paying for school taxes, which they are really high, really, really high. But see, they clump all that in and they call it property tax. Why should you be on the hook if you've paid for your home, right? You shouldn't. If your house is paid off, you should never have to pay property taxes. Like, I can understand paying for like fire, police. If you still have kids going to school, okay, yeah, I can see you paying taxes for that. But other than that, no. And see, in my opinion, what's happened is these local officials, they've gotten so comfortable with just raising people's property taxes. Oh, well, the evaluation's going up. So, your house is worth more and this, that, and the other. So you have to pay more in property taxes. Like, but you're not doing anything better with the money. There's still potholes in the streets, right? Things are still running amok in the city. It looks crazy, but yet you keep charging people more and more and more because you can. Doesn't mean you should. So there needs to be, like, in my opinion, like a whole revamping of how we've been doing things on that level. But it says, by authority vested in me as president of the Constitution and the laws of the United States. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I just wanted to point this out. Section 1. Buying and owning a home has long been considered the pinnacle of the American dream and a way for families to invest and build lifetime wealth. But because of the recent high inflation and interest rates caused by the previous administration, and even further that, again, it goes beyond, in my opinion, the Biden administration. Okay, that the American dream has been increasingly out of reach for too many of our citizens, especially first-time home buyers. At the same time, a growing share of single Family homes, often concentrated in certain communities, have been purchased by large Wall Street investors, crowding out families seeking to buy homes. Hardworking young families cannot effectively compete for starter homes with Wall Street firms and their vast resources. Neighborhoods and communities once controlled by middle class American families are now run by faraway corporate interests. People live in homes, not corporations, right? So, my administration will take divisive action to stop Wall Street from treating Americans' neighborhoods like a trading floor and empower American families to own their homes, to preserve the supply of single family homes for American families and increase the paths to home ownership. It is the policy of my administration that large institutional investors should not buy single family homes that could otherwise be purchased by families. And I'll stop there and I'll make sure to link this in the repost. But yeah, he's saying the quiet part out loud. And I won't say the quiet part out loud. He's saying what Americans have been saying for a while. But remember, back in 2020, there was that video that was released by the World Economic Forum because they just were like, let's throw our weight around. You will be happy and own nothing. They wanted everybody to just be constant renters. Rent your house, rent your car. They even have, look, they've got hubcaps that you can put on your cars that you can rent. It's called Rent-A-Wheel. It's in California. It's crazy. Really? Rent everything? You can rent clothes, shoes. Yes, they do have services like that. It's kind of crazy. But they want everybody in a renting capacity, not in an owning capacity. Because, see, people that are owners, they demand things. But people that are renters are always subjected to the people that they're renting from because they have no ownership stake. They have no say. So, you know, when I saw those videos back in 2020, I was like, oh, they just want a whole new class of slaves. I'm not wrong. And they're still on that trajectory. But now you've got President Trump in the way saying, okay, no, people are going to have ownership of their homes as they should because we're Americans, and that is a part of the American dream. Now, a lot of people might get upset and be like, well, I don't like him and this, that, and the third. Okay, you don't have to like him. I like this policy, though. This is what I voted for. I voted for this to shut this down. Now, Congress is going to have to solidify this law. So I would encourage all of you to call the White House and let me see if I can find it in my banners because sometimes yes, let me see if I can show it and it'll show up. Yes, to call the White House or their comment line. It's 202-456-1111. Again, that number is 202-456-1111. Or you can email comments@whitehouse.gov. That's comments@whitehouse.gov. And let them know where you are at on this because they need to hear us. They need to know that we are, we want this change and we want Congress to make this the law. And it's weird because why wasn't it? Oh, that's right. Because they're in a lot of the pockets of the congressmen and women that we have there. And a lot of these congressmen and women, they're on and okay with people not owning anything and being happy. It's very sad. Truly, truly sad. So let's go on. Let's see some of the remarks that President Trump has had since he's been at Davos.
Those moments overseas between President Trump, Governor Gavin Newsom, and the ongoing threat over Greenland. Thank you for joining us. I'm Alex Bell. Governor Newsom is in Davos this weekend, attending the World Economic Forum along with a few other governors. But today, Newsom's team tells ABC 10 the governor's first speaking event was abruptly canceled under pressure from the White House. Now, we'll get to what was said in just a moment and also the Trump administration's response. But first, Karen Travers is at the White House tonight reporting on President Trump's speech in Davos and that ongoing threat to take over Greenland.
President Trump says he will not use force for the U.S. to acquire Greenland, but European leaders say they're hitting pause on a trade deal as the president threatens new tariffs. President Trump posting on social media that after meeting with NATO's Secretary General, he has a, quote, framework of a future deal on Greenland. He provided no details of what a deal would include, but said Vice President Vance and Secretary of State Rubio would lead negotiations on the U.S. Golden Dome missile defense system and Greenland. The president also saying he's backing off his threat of new tariffs on 8 NATO allies. But earlier, the president dug in.
This enormous unsecured island is actually part of North America, on the northern frontier of the Western Hemisphere. That's our territory.
But the president at the World Economic Forum in Davos stepping back from his previous rhetoric that suggested he could use the military to make that happen.
People thought I would use force. I don't have to use force. I don't want to use force. I won't use force.
The president was asked later why he took the military option off the table.
I don't think it'll be necessary. I really don't. Okay. I think people are going to use better judgment. They'll use their best judgment, and I don't think that will not be necessary.
And his message and warning to Denmark and NATO.
They have a choice. You can say yes, and we will be very appreciative, or you can say no, and we will remember.
The president maintains it's the U.S. alone that can protect Greenland, but European leaders are pushing back strongly.
The future of Greenland is only for the Greenlanders to decide.
President Trump says he'll meet on the sidelines of Davos tomorrow with Ukraine's President Zelensky. He said today they're reasonably close to reaching a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine, but the president has expressed similar optimism before, and no deal has been reached. Karen Travers, ABC News, the White House.
Tonight, during President Trump's speech in Davos, he called out Governor Gavin Newsom in a moment that was actually captured by C-SPAN. Take a look.
I used to get along so great with Gavin when I was president. Gavin's a good guy.
Again, C-SPAN posted this video on Instagram today showing President Trump speaking. Then you saw the camera kind of pan there. It panned over to Newsom in the crowd. The governor laughing, even trying to hold back a laugh during the speech where President Trump said that he helped a lot in Los Angeles last year and that his administration has cut down on crime. The president also saying that starting immediately, there will be no more payments to sanctuary cities. Now, all of this came as Governor Newsom's office says that the governor's first speaking event was canceled due to pressure from the Trump administration, despite the event being held by Fortune magazine. Now, Newsom's team says the governor was instead offered a VIP nightcap reception for off-the-record drinks, which he declined. When Trump's Treasury Secretary spoke today in Davos, he had a message for the governor.
And I can tell my message to Governor Newsom is the Trump administration is coming to California. We are going to crack down on waste, fraud, and abuse. And I was told he was asked to give a speech on his signature policies, but he's not speaking because what have his economic policies brought? Outward migration from California, a gigantic budget deficit, the largest homeless population in America, and the poor folks in the Palisades who had their homes burned down. He is here hobnobbing with the global elite while his California citizens are still homeless. Shame on him. He is too smug, too self-absorbed, and too economically illiterate to know anything.
Well, ABC 10 has reached out to Governor Newsom's office for comment about these statements, and we have not heard back yet. Meanwhile, Governor Newsom has a speaking event scheduled in Davos at 11:30 tonight, local time. Now, people online are asking who is funding the governor's trip to Davos. People are asking, is it the taxpayers? Who is it? So, of course, we wanted to know, too. In a statement from the governor's office tonight, ABC 10 is told, quote, consistent with previous trips and across multiple administrations, Democratic and Republican, the governor and his staff's travel is not funded by taxpayers. This trip is supported through non-state funds via the California State Protocol Foundation. The California State Protocol Foundation is a nonprofit that uses private donations rather than taxpayer funds to pay for certain expenditures of the governor's office.
Yeah. And more than likely, it is a 501c4 because a 501c4 is similar to a 501c3. However, you can take donations, and those donors do not have to be disclosed. So this is how sometimes people fund their 501c3s. They'll have a 501c4 where anybody can donate to them, even terrorist organizations, by the way. I just want to let you know that. And then they will funnel the money into their 501c3, right? Saying, okay, we're getting donations from the 4 to the 3, and then they will carry out whatever functions are of their 501c3, which is a tax-free organization. So yeah, that's kind of the game in the background, just to let you know. And it is very fascinating. It's like, why can't you say who's funding you? You're saying it's not the taxpayers, so who is it? You're hanging out with Alex Soros. Now we're going to go back to those statements made by Scott Bissett, and this is just an expansion of his remarks. I'm not going to play the whole video of his remarks, but I just wanted to give a little bit more context, give Scott a little bit more airtime.
In the Trump administration.
Governor calls you smug. Are you smug?
Yeah, you know, I think it's very, very ironic that, you know, Governor Newsom, who strikes me as Patrick Bateman meets Sparkle Beach Ken, may be the only Californian who knows less about economics than Kamala Harris. He's here this week with his billionaire sugar daddy, Alex Soros, and Davos is the perfect place for a man who, when everyone else was on lockdown, when he was having people arrested for going to church, he was having $1,000 a night meals at the French Laundry, and I'm sure the California people won't forget that. And I can tell my message to Governor Newsom is the Trump administration is coming to California. We are going to crack down on waste, fraud, and abuse. And I was told he was asked to give a speech on his signature policies, but he's not speaking because what have his economic policies brought? Outward migration from California, a gigantic budget deficit, the largest homeless population in America, and the poor folks in the Palisades who had their homes burned down. He is here hobnobbing with the global elite while his California citizens are still homeless. Shame on him. He is too smug, too self-absorbed, and too economically illiterate to know anything.
Thank you very much.
Let me know if you need any further clarification.
And that goes for all of you, if you need any more clarification on that. Next question, please, gentlemen. Second row with glasses, name and outlet, please. Thank you.
Good morning, Jamie Keaton, Associated Press. Thank you, Secretary, for coming to see us again. Yesterday, the S&P 500 dropped more than 2%. Gold and silver hit new highs, and the European Union Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said that U.S. tariffs over Greenland were a mistake, and President Macron has mentioned the use of the EU's anti-coercion measures. All after you said, as you've said this morning as well, that people need to take a breath over this situation. What conversations have you had with EU and other counterparts to help stabilize markets and to help convince them to take a breath? And I'd just like to add, how concerned are you that institutional investors in Europe may be pulling out of treasuries, such as from pension funds in Denmark and elsewhere?
Well, the size, Denmark's investment in U.S. Treasury bonds, like Denmark itself, is irrelevant. That it's less than $100 million. They've been selling treasuries for years. I'm not concerned at all. Again, as Treasury Secretary, I see our Treasury auctions. We've had record foreign investment. And also, as I said yesterday, I think it is very difficult to disaggregate any of the noise around Greenland, around these inflammatory statements by President Macron, by President van der Leyen, from what we have seen in the Japanese bond markets. We saw a 6 standard deviation move in Japanese bonds, which has spilled over to other markets. And I have been in touch with my Japanese economic colleagues, and I am assured that they will take measures to stabilize that market. And just so everyone knows, that this notion that Europeans would be selling U.S. assets came from a single analyst at Deutsche Bank. Of course, the fake news media, led by the Financial Times, amplified it, and the CEO of Deutsche Bank called to say that Deutsche Bank does not stand by that analyst report.
Yes. So I'm going to move on because there are some other individuals in the Trump administration that were sharing, um, their thoughts from being in Davos. But I find it fascinating only because, like you said, some analysts from Deutsche, said some things, and then Deutsche has to come up behind and say, look, they said what they said. We're not involved in that. They're just running scared. This whole thing with Greenland, I think it's going to pan out well, but it's proper steps, how you're doing this, what you're doing, your reasoning, I've heard some rumors where they've said, kind of similar to Alaska, they can kind of pay you to live there as long as you're allowing them to go in and get the resources that are there. You'll be protected. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with Greenland. But yeah, apparently they are not framing. They're giving the nickname to Gavin Newsom as Patrick Bateman, Sparkle Ken doll. Okay. Now, people might be wondering, who's Patrick Bateman? Well, if you've ever seen a movie called American Psycho, yeah, that was played by Christian Bale, where he is, in essence, a psychopath and sociopath. And he goes around killing people because that's what he does. And then by daytime, he's just this well-dressed person. It's kind of loosely based on the life of Ted Bundy, in that vein, right? Because Ted Bundy was a real person who unfortunately was a sociopath and psychopath, and he killed women all over the country. Yeah, really sad. But now that we've got a governor who is a psychopath and sociopath, people are still homeless. The fire happened last January. We are coming up on a year, and people still have not had the ability to rebuild in the Palisades. And they're still looking at turning that area into a smart city. So will the people ever get their homes back? Will they ever get their lives given back to them? We haven't even talked about the families in Altadena that are about an hour away from the Palisades, and those individuals, especially Black families that had been there for decades. When are their lives going to be restored to them? Yeah, Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass have done a huge disservice to the citizens and residents in California, and I'm really hoping that they'll be able to get back on track. So let's go to this next person from the Trump administration. Again, I'm not going to play the whole video. It's going to play just a bit of it, and then I will post the link in the repost.
The World Economic Forum. And the Trump administration and myself, we are here to make a very clear point. Globalization has failed the West and the United States of America. It's a failed policy. It is what the WEF has stood for, which is export, offshore, far shore, find the cheapest labor in the world, and the world is a better place for it. The fact is, it has left America behind. It has left the American workers behind. And what we are here to say is that America First is a different model, one that we encourage other countries to consider, which is that our workers come first. We can have policies that impact our workers. Sovereignty is your borders. You're entitled to have borders. You shouldn't offshore your medicine. You shouldn't offshore your semiconductors. You shouldn't offshore your entire industrial base and have it be hollowed out beneath you. You should not be dependent for that which is fundamental to your sovereignty on any other nation. And if you're going to be dependent on, darn well better be your best allies. Okay? And so that is a different way of thinking. It is completely different than the WEF. I viewed the WEF as not a flagpole in the middle, but in fact, they are the flag. Whichever way the wind blew, so it blew. You should have solar, you should have wind. Why are you going to do solar and wind? Why would Europe agree to be net zero in 2030 when they don't make a battery? They don't make a battery. So if they go 2030, they are deciding to be subservient to China, who makes the batteries.
Wall Street's had its time. Now it's time to rebalance for Main Street and the farmers. These are quotes by Ludnick and by Besant, and they're actually doing it. Like, they're going to be rich and powerful and have all these zeros in the bank account, ones and zeros, but nowhere to spend it, and a hellscape society of austerity. And then Carney responds to this.
We understand that this rupture calls for more than adaptation. It calls for honesty about the world as it is. We are taking the sign out of the window. We know the old order is not coming back. We shouldn't mourn it. Nostalgia is not a strategy. But we believe that from the fracture, we can build something bigger, better, stronger, more just. This is the task of the middle powers. The countries that have the most to lose from a world of fortresses and the most to gain from genuine cooperation. The powerful have their power. But we have something too. The capacity to stop pretending, to name reality, to build our strength at home, and to act together. That is Canada's path. We choose it openly and confidently, and it is a path wide open to any country willing to take it with us.
Yeah. So I will definitely, again, leave that link. And I wanted to get a little bit more into how the executive order for the housing will benefit the American people. So the core policy is that large investors should not buy single-family homes that could otherwise go to families. It includes timelines for definitions within 30 days, federal guidance within 60 days, reviews of rules, antitrust enforcement, ownership, disclosures, and recommendations for legislation to make this permanent. Exceptions are allowed for build-to-rent communities and other narrowly tailored cases. Yeah, so with the exceptions being allowed for this whole build-to-rent, I don't like it. I do not like it. People need to be homeowners. They should not be forced into a life of perpetual rent. And in my opinion, I think that, because cities, they'll be giving these places discounts and, all this stuff on taxes. And they'll be like, well, we need to build more homes for more people. No, we don't. Because there's a lot of people that need to go home. They need to be off the soil. They don't need to be here. They're not helping in our economy. They're hurting our economy. So, yeah, I'm really hoping that will change. And that's something that we need to definitely be on Congress about. And the reason why I jumped back to it is because for everything that is said at the World Economic Forum, it affects policies like this. When all of the, well-to-do people, because some of there are governors, Democrat and Republican, right? I remember Governor Kemp a couple of years back, and even Stacey Abrams. They were both at Davos. I think that was either 21 or 22. Yeah, they were both at Davos. I was like, what are y'all doing at Davos? You don't need to be there. Why are you there? It's very telling who is ever at Davos, this whole World Economic Forum meeting. And so benefits for the American people, the order focuses on empowering families to achieve the American dream of home ownership, which builds personal wealth and stability. And so here's how it will help individuals: easier access to home ownership for families and first time buyers. So by restricting federal agencies like HUD, USDA, VA, and FHFA from ensuring, guaranteeing, or facilitating sales of single family homes to large investors, right? The order frees up more inventory for individual buyers, right? And this reduces bidding wars where families are outmatched by cash rich firms, potentially making starter homes more affordable, right? Because if you got BlackRock sitting over here with an endless cash flow, and then you've got, the American individual over here trying to buy a home, and they're like, I really need this at 450. The home is at 420. They get in the bidding war, and the person, the individual family, they have a budget of 450. Well, the BlackRock people could be like 500. The builder's going to go with the person who's going to give them more money. They're not going to go with the American family. And that's the issue. It's being outbid by this endless money. And again, insult to injury, they get to write this stuff off. It's crazy. So provisions like first look policies and anti-circumvention rules give owner occupants priority in federal asset sales, directly helping young families and middle-class Americans enter the market. This could lower entry barriers and in high demand areas where inventories have scooped up, where investors have scooped up more than 20 to 30% of homes in some metros based on pre-2026 housing data trends. And what it does is it inflates the market artificially, because who's living in these homes? Nobody. They just buy them up. And then, a lot of times they'll rent them out. Yeah. Mhm. It's really crazy. Wealth building and financial security, stable and family oriented neighborhoods, protections from speculation and price inflation. And so the benefits to the economy by promoting widespread home ownership and curbing speculative investment, the order could foster a more balanced housing market, stimulating growth in related sectors while reducing systemic risk. Housing is a massive part of the US economy, 15 to 18% of the GDP when including construction, real estate services, and consumer spending tied to homes. So it is a large part of our GDP, and we need that. We need to be independent in that way. But again, it's going to come back to, who's buying these homes. And I'm really hoping that they get away from these NGOs giving money to people that are here illegally to buy homes and get loans, because I'm not sure if those policies were overturned. I'm gonna have to do a little bit more investigation in that. But I just remember under the Biden administration, people that were here illegally, they were allowed to buy homes. It's like, how can you buy a house when you've never worked here? You don't have a social security number. You're not even an American citizen, but you're being allowed to buy a home. Like, it's really crazy. Really, really crazy how they just really wanted to destroy America. So, in summary, this executive order tackles a key pain point in the post inflation economy by tilting the housing market back towards families, which should enhance personal prosperity, community stability, and broad based growth. While it may face legal challenges or pushback from investors, I'm sure it will, it its focus on curbing Wall Street's edge aligns with populist economic goals. If fully implemented, it could mark a shift toward a more equitable housing system. And isn't that something that the Democrats always talk about? We need to make things fair. We need to make things equitable. And yet, you're the very people supporting all of these corporations to buy up all of this property. You're not making it so where the American people can. You're not. And I think that goes on both sides, Republican and Democrat, because they're both benefiting from this. And so now it comes back to, okay, Congress, House, and Senate, you better put this forward. Because if you don't, We all know where you stand. This bill right here, this is the line in the sand with the American people. I don't care who you are, what you say. If they do not do this, we will know exactly who you're working for and exactly why you're not passing this law or codifying it. We will know who you are. Again, make sure you call the White House, 202-456-1111. That's 202-456-1111, and let them know that you want this executive order passed into law. You want this passed into law. It needs to be. It really, really does. It is really, truly time for the American people to have some freedoms, real freedoms. And home ownership is a freedom that it's yours, right? That it's yours. And so next, I wanted to look at another short video. Now, this one is talking about the Second and Fourth Amendment. Now, this one I hadn't seen. And so I'm like, okay, because, SCOTUS has been doing a lot of different rulings, which I'm glad for. I'm definitely looking for how they rule on the 14th Amendment. But this one has to do with the Second and the Fourth Amendment. So, 2A, as people like to say, Second Amendment is about our right to bear arms. And then the Fourth Amendment is the right to a proper search and seizure, right? You can't just go in and investigate somebody without probable cause, right? That's our way of our Fourth Amendment protecting us. Unless, you think this person is doing a crime, you have to think. You've got to have more than just, I think they're doing something wrong. So let's look at what's happening with SCOTUS and how it's going to affect the American people.
Earthquake in the Constitution. While most Americans were glued to political headlines, courtroom drama, and culture wars, a quiet but powerful event unfolded inside the marble halls of the Supreme Court. In a rare moment of total agreement, the justices issued a 9-0 unanimous decision, not on a technicality or minor regulation, but on a fundamental question that strikes at the heart of personal freedom. This ruling doesn't shout about the Second Amendment, but if you carry a firearm, own one, or simply care about how far government force can go, this decision changes everything. The case Barnes versus Felix centered on a police shooting, but the court's opinion reached far beyond one tragedy. It redefined how the Fourth Amendment protects you from excessive force and unconstitutional seizures. And here's the critical twist. This wasn't just a correction. It was a complete rejection of the way lower courts have handled these cases for years. The ruling demands a new standard, a deeper one that considers the full context of an incident, not just the split second when a weapon is drawn. So why should gun owners care? Because this changes how every armed citizen might be treated in a traffic stop, during a home visit, or while simply exercising their rights. The rules of engagement have shifted and they now lean toward accountability. What the justices ruled and why it matters. How this affects self-defense cases and concealed carriers, and what every responsible gun owner must understand going forward. Let's break down this ruling step by step. The promise of Duncan versus Bonta. This wasn't just any lawsuit. Duncan v. Bonta was personal to millions of law-abiding gun owners in California. For years, they had lived under some of the harshest magazine restrictions in the country. And then came Judge Roger Benitez, who ruled that California's ban on so-called high-capacity magazines violated the Constitution. That ruling lit a fire nationwide. It seemed to validate what many already believed, that laws restricting magazines based on size or capacity weren't really about safety, but about control. Benitez said what many felt. The Second Amendment doesn't have a round limit, but that hope was short-lived. The Ninth Circuit reversed Benitez, claiming the ban served public safety, even if it meant infringing on a constitutional right. They said these magazines weren't historically necessary. They argued the government had a compelling reason, and that's when things collided with Bruin. Bruin changed everything, or did it? In New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin, the Supreme Court laid down a new standard: no more balancing tests. No more government justifications about crime rates or feelings. If a gun law doesn't match the history and tradition of firearm regulation in this country, it's unconstitutional. Period. That's why Duncan became such a pivotal test. The Ninth Circuit's reasoning clashed directly with Bruen. Instead of looking at history, they looked at what lawmakers today think is reasonable. That's exactly what Bruen said courts can't do anymore. So Duncan's team went back to the Supreme Court, asking it to step in, once and for all. But instead of hearing the case or denying it outright, the Supreme Court quietly moved it, rescheduling the decision for later. No decision is still a decision. This silence, this delay, speaks volumes. When the highest court in the land doesn't act, the laws underneath don't pause. They stay in the books. People still get arrested. Prosecutors still press charges. Gun owners still lose their rights while waiting for a ruling that may never come. And this isn't new. We've seen this kind of strategic waiting before. In Catano versus Massachusetts, it took years for the court to say that even modern weapons like stun guns are protected by the Second Amendment. In the meantime, people were prosecuted and convicted for simply having a non-lethal device in their purses. What we're seeing now in Duncan feels familiar. A delayed decision that keeps everyone in a state of legal confusion. While SCOTUS waits, states push forward. Some states aren't waiting for clarity. They're pushing ahead with new restrictions. New Jersey, Oregon, and Colorado all introduced or enforced magazine bans that resemble or even exceed California's. Why? Because they know delays benefit them. The longer the court stays silent, the longer their laws stay enforceable even if unconstitutional. That creates a legal patchwork. One state says 15 rounds are legal, another says 10, a third says pre-ban magazines are fine, but only if you've registered them. For everyday citizens, this is chaos, not law. And if you get it wrong, you don't just get a fine. You get charged with a felony. The real-world cost.
And I wanted to also add, criminals are not going to follow these laws. Okay, they're always going to have their guns. They're always going to have their weapons. And it needs to come back to, okay, politicians, are you going to lock these people up or not? Are you really going to do your job or not? And in my opinion, that's why people should be put back in office. If the crime is low, then you're doing your job. But if it's not, and it's rampant and it's just overdrawn, and they're like, yeah, put us in office so we can help. No, you've been in office for 10 years and it's gotten worse under you. So you need to be put out of office. That's what needs to start happening. Because in my opinion, these politicians, they're working with the criminals to make sure that the citizens following the law are suppressed. I don't know how else to say it, or how it's playing itself out this way. This is what it is. And we need to really make sure that people's feet are being held to the fire in that capacity.
Of legal limbo. Think about this scenario. You bought a 17-round Glock mag during the brief window after Judge Benitez struck down the ban. You still have the receipt. You carry it unloaded in your glove box exactly as your instructor advised. Then you get pulled over, the officer sees the magazine, arrests you, and now you're facing a criminal charge even though what you did was legal when you bought it. This isn't fiction. This is what's happening in states like California and New Jersey right now. Because when courts send mixed signals, enforcement doesn't slow down. It speeds up. Why does the court's silence matter? Every day the Supreme Court delays, the consequences stack up. It may not seem like much on the surface. A case rescheduled, a decision deferred, but in the real world, lives are impacted. Families are seeing legal bills pile up. Veterans are losing their gun rights over what used to be standard equipment. Prosecutors are digging through old cases, using the uncertainty to press harder. And good people are pleading guilty just to avoid the risk of a felony conviction. This isn't how justice is supposed to work. When the law's unsettled, enforcement should pause. But right now, enforcement is racing ahead. What's really going on behind the curtain? Many legal experts believe the Supreme Court isn't avoiding gun rights cases. They're deliberately waiting for them. But why? The strategy appears to be timing. The court might be holding off until several major cases like Duncan versus Bonta, Oregon's Measure 114 magazine ban, and New Jersey's strict enforcement policies are all in front of them together. That would allow the court to make one unified decision that settles the law nationwide, rather than issuing narrow rulings one at a time. This isn't new. The court did something similar in the past. For example, in McDonald versus Chicago, they waited until the landmark Heller decision firmly established that the Second Amendment protects individual gun rights and then applied that principle to the states. In Bruin, they allowed lower courts to contradict themselves for years before stepping in to set a new standard based on historical tradition. But here's the key difference. The stakes today are far higher. People aren't just debating theory, they're being arrested, prosecuted, threatened with felony records. They're losing jobs, custody rights, even their ability to vote, all because of conflicting laws about what magazines they own and where they live. And the longer the Supreme Court stays silent, the more it looks like they're not being neutral but indecisive. That silence has real costs, and those costs are being paid by everyday Americans right now. The core legal question: what is an arm? At the heart of Duncan and every magazine ban is one crucial question. What counts as an arm under the Second Amendment? The founders didn't say only muskets. They didn't list a round count. They didn't create carve-outs for excessive firepower. In fact, the phrase "shall not be infringed" was meant to stop exactly this kind of erosio, where a right becomes so chipped away by restrictions that it effectively disappears. The court's own decisions, from Heller to Bruin, suggest that magazines are part of commonly used arms. They're essential for modern self-defense. They're not military exclusive. They're not unusual or dangerous in the legal sense. So why are they still being banned? Because lower courts are still using outdated tests, and the Supreme Court, for now, is letting them. When precedent is ignored, one of the most alarming trends in Duncan's story is how openly some courts are resisting Bruin. We've seen lower judges admit they disagree with the new historical standard and then rule based on their own personal beliefs anyway. We've seen state attorneys general instruct police to continue enforcing bans, despite contradictory rulings. That's not how precedent is supposed to work. When the Supreme Court sets a standard, it's binding. But in the world of gun laws, many courts and legislatures are treating those standards as optional, or worse, as obstacles to be sidestepped. Coniglia v. Strom, the Fourth Amendment link. This fight isn't just about the Second Amendment, it intersects with the Fourth. In Coniglia v. Strom, the Supreme Court unanimously ruled that police cannot enter your home and seize firearms without a warrant, even under a so-called community caretaking function. That decision reinforced the idea that constitutional rights don't evaporate during emergencies or public safety claims. Duncan echoes the same tension. Can the government justify taking away something, in this case a magazine, by calling it a danger, even when it's privately owned, lawfully acquired, and constitutionally protected? If the court ruled unanimously in Coniglia that warrantless home entry was unconstitutional, how can it justify letting states criminalize ownership of a common gun accessory? That's why legal scholars see Duncan as a bridge between Bruin and Coniglia. It connects the dots between the right to keep arms and the right to be secure in your property. Where this is headed next. Based on the docket activity, most believe Duncan will be relisted again, possibly for a batch decision alongside similar cases. The court may be preparing to issue one major ruling that sets the standard for all magazine bans nationwide. But until that happens, confusion remains. Some states are doubling down. Others are quietly backing off, and citizens are left guessing what's legal where they live. That's not law, that's chaos. And unless the Supreme Court acts quickly, it risks undermining its own authority and the very Constitution it's sworn to protect. This fight isn't over. This isn't just about magazines or California or one court case. It's about how far the government can go before your rights mean nothing. When laws can change overnight and compliance today becomes a crime tomorrow, we're no longer talking about public safety. We're talking about control. What's happening in Duncan, Oregon, and New Jersey isn't theoretical. It's real. It's personal. And it's putting lawful citizens at risk simply for owning what was once perfectly legal. So stay alert. Know your state's laws. Watch these cases carefully, because what happens in one courtroom can change everything across all 50 states. And if you value real, honest breakdowns like this, no noise, no fear tactics, just the facts.
Wow. So that's pretty intense, how things can kind of overlap, right? And I think that was, the point he was getting to. And he said to kind of mesh together. It's like, yeah, a lot of overlap. It's very scary. So the recent rulings on the Second Amendment and their effects on America. So here are some of the cases that were brought up. And it says, in recent years, building on the framework established in New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Buren, that was one of the cases that were mentioned in the video, which requires gun regulations to align with historical traditions of firearm regulation. These rules balance individual gun rights with public safety concerns, often clarifying limits on government restrictions. Below outline some major cases and their practical impacts. But again, I always look at this. They want to regulate law abiding citizens while allowing chaos from criminals. You're not locking them up. You could, you have the ability to, right? You have the ability to lock these people up, but you're not. And like I said, that goes back to politicians. Whose side are you on? Because you're not on the side of the American people. So in the United States versus Rami in 24, the court upheld 8-1, a federal law prohibiting individuals subject to domestic violence restraining orders from possessing firearms, finding it consistent with historical precedents for disarming those posing threats of violence. Yeah, they should not get a gun because they've already been subjected to a felony, right? And usually when you have a felony, you should not be, you don't have the ability to have a firearm. So it's kind of interesting to even have that conversation. So the effects, this protects potential victims of domestic abuse by allowing temporary disarmament of credible threats, potentially reducing gun-related violence in households. However, it limits Second Amendment rights for those under restraining orders, even if not convicted, raising concerns for due process. It has led to it has led to remands in related cases, right, where lower courts reevaluated similar restrictions on drug users or felons, potentially broadening challenges to other federal gun bans. It's really interesting because I'm like, if someone has been the victim, right, I would think, yeah, they might want to have a firearm, right? But if they're saying that if you are under um, like domestic abuse, wow, that's really crazy. It might potentially reduce gun-related threats in the household. Wow, that's crazy. So limits Second Amendment rights for those under restraining orders, even if not convicted. That's intense. So Garland versus Cargill, in a 6-3 decision, the court ruled that bump stocks devices allowed semi-automatic rifles to fire more rapidly. Do not convert rifles into machine guns under federal law, striking down a Trump-era ATF ban. And here's the thing. They have where you can print and make guns, and there's a lot of different ways to have guns. Again, criminals are always going to have guns, but if they it's interesting. So in Cargill, the court ruled that bump stocks devices allowing semi-automatic weapons do not convert rifles into the. Yeah, see, when you start messing with the guns, again, criminals are going to have their guns. The law-abiding are going to be the only people following this, and they're going to be subject to people overpowering them. The effects, gun owners can legally possess and use bump stocks, enhancing access to rapid-fire capabilities for self-defense or recreation. Critics argue these increases risk in mass shootings as seen in past incidents like Las Vegas, potentially prompting states to enact their own bans or Congress to clarify definitions. And let's just be clear, the incident that happened in Las Vegas, they kind of went through it, tied it back, and a lot of it was our own federal government interfering in that whole situation, allegedly. Okay. So some of these mass shootings, they're used as ways to further take away our rights and civil liberties because they do use them. I mean, they do. I'm just saying. They use them as bellwethers to come in and say, hey, we made it to take away your rights. Oh my gosh, it's another mass shooting. I'm surprised we haven't had another mass shooting. Like they've had incidents with ICE one-on-one. Where's the mass shooting at? I'm waiting. Where's the false flag? Because it has to be coming because you've got people on a powder keg right now. You've got Don Lemon and these other BLM representatives violating a church KKK act, which is completely crazy because it was put in place to protect black people. And here you have black people violating white people. What are we doing? It's crazy. Insane. Insane. What are you doing? But it's going to lead to something bigger. And then it'll be like, oh, we've got to do this. We've got to do that. We've got to. Yeah. Yeah. We're getting closer to being free as the American people. I'm telling you, we need to hold these politicians accountable. Now, Bondi versus Vanderstock, the court held likely 6-3 based on conservative leanings that the ATF can regulate weapon parts, kits, and unfinished frames receivers under the Gun Control Act of 1968, treating them as regulable firearms. Okay, so this curbs the proliferation and untraceable ghost guns, right? Aiding law enforcement in tracking firearms used in crimes. For citizens, it imposes serialization and background check requirements on DIY kits, limiting anonymous assembly, but not banning ownership of complete firearms. Yeah, here's my thing. Were muskets, I'd say use a musket, for example, did they have a registry of people back then who had guns? No, they didn't. And part of it is it's like, okay, I understand why you want people to register with the state, right? So you know how many guns, who has it, if there's an incident, if there's a crime, you can trace this. But again, the criminals are going to always have guns. You're over-regulating citizens, but you're not processing or prosecuting the criminals. Why all the laws if you're really not going to deal with crime? That's where I'm at with it. And that's the sad part. But at the end of it, trying to get down to the summary. So upcoming cases like Chatri, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, versus United States, that was in 26, will address geofence warrants where police obtain location data from tech companies without individualized suspicion. A ruling could limit mass digital surveillance, preserving privacy in an area of constant tracking. So, in summary, these Fourth Amendment decisions provide more leeway for police in high stakes situations, emergencies, while broadening reviews of force, benefiting citizens through greater oversight. However, they may reduce privacy protections, especially in homes or digital spaces, and tie into Second Amendment issues by affecting armed encounters, as noted by the video's discussion of Barnes and its links to self-defense. This creates a complex landscape where rights are protected against over prosecution, but vulnerable to it on the spot judgments. Yeah. So let's just say you're in an area where an incident happens. You haven't done anything, but the geofencing puts you in this area. Now you are subject to, basically being questioned and your Fourth Amendment rights possibly being violated, right? You might feel like you're violated, but at the same time, they're like, we just need to find out who was there, when they were there, and you just happened to be there, or you're part of it. What did you know? When did you know it? And part of that does go back to, okay, are we over policing or are we actually going after the criminals? You've got all this technology. It's kind of wild to me. You got all this technology, but still people run around doing criminal behavior. You got all this technology, but you still have, criminality going on in sports betting. Are you really taking care of the criminals? Are you really dealing with the situation? I don't think so. I don't think so. And when I see cases like this, I'm like, you guys don't want to deal with the stuff that's going on. No, you don't. You don't. You just want us to believe that you are. You don't care. Okay, so we've got some historic winter from Florida to Russia. Yeah, the cold is coming, y'all. I'm here in Georgia. It's bad. It's bad. I do not like the cold. I do not like it. I want it gone. I was trying to go to some news from yesterday. This is something I came across, and it was very intense. I was like, so New Jersey is to mandate teaching of cursive in schools. Why hasn't it always been mandated? Oh, yeah, that's right. Because for the past 20 years, they stopped doing it. They stopped teaching handwriting. You guys, it's really crazy. So, on his last day in office, New Jersey Governor Phil Murray signed a law that will mandate teaching cursive writing to public school students from grades 3 to 5 from the beginning of the 2026 to 2027 school year. So, the bill was sponsored by Democratic State Senators Angela McKnight and Shirley Turner. Murphy and other supporters of the legislation have said students should know how to write in cursive so they can sign important documents and read important historical texts. Where have y'all been for the past 20 years? That's my question. You're just now realizing that? I mean, I'm glad you've woken up to it, but it's like, okay, 2 decades. Got it. So cursive was removed from New Jersey's Common Core standards in 2010. So for them, 16 years. Okay. So McKnight first introduced the bill years ago, but was unsuccessful in rallying support for it. With the reinstatement, New Jersey joins over 24 states, including California, Florida, Illinois, and Texas, that currently require its teaching. All right. So Murphy said in a statement, we owe it to our students to give them a well rounded education that ensures they have the tools to fully understand our rich history and become competent readers. Yeah, because mostly third graders right now can't read. Yeah, since last year. So the 2025 class and hopefully not moving forward, but the babies can't read. Yeah, it's very sad. So Murphy said in a statement, I read that. So Murphy was replaced by fellow Democrat Mike Sherrill, who now serves as the state's 75th governor. On Tuesday, Sherrill issued executive orders on her first day, mostly aimed at tackling rising energy costs and a lack of trust in government. Yeah, they can't trust you guys because you're trash and you're allowing criminality all over the place. You're not taking care of the people, and people see it. And I'm really hoping that people continue to, just hammer down like we want better from these politicians because they should be servants of the people, not politicians. So the Philadelphia Inquirer reported perspectives from both supporters and critics of the new law. The Inquirer cited some who believed writing is becoming obsolete and that schools should focus on teaching technology and AI, and that the subject will be difficult to teach because of a lack of resources or interest from students. It also noted a local South Jersey school that never stopped teaching cursive and that some experts believe learning cursive improves motor skills and development. It does. The New York Post, that leans right, framed the news positively, saying New Jersey is flipping the script and noting a state assemblywoman who spoke of the neurological benefits of learning cursive. Yeah, because it pushes your brain to actually use the creative side and the logical side of your brain. So, yeah, we need it. We've always needed it. But what's happened to those children who were just kind of left out behind and not being able to do it. I also wanted to check this out. The report finds that the U.S. consumers pay 96% of tariff costs, right? Yeah, yeah. So, for details, after analyzing over 25 million shipment records between January 2024 and November 25, the Institute found foreign exporters paid only 4% of tariffs. According to the report, the U.S. collected $195 billion in tariff revenue for the fiscal year 2025, U.S. consumers paying roughly $187.2 billion of that. It also showed U.S. prices rose almost 1-for-1 with tariffs, and that a 10% point increase in tariffs reduced foreign export prices by only 30.39%. The report also compared exports from India and found prices charged to the U.S. didn't fall compared to other markets, which it says suggests Indian exporters reduced their exports, not their prices. So, other research from the Yale, Harvard, and Cato Institutes also showed consumers are most affected by the tariffs. The Yale Budget Lab found that consumers face on average a tariff rate of 16.8%, the highest since 1935. It also found tariffs slowed U.S. and real GDP growth by 0.5 percentage points in 2025. Trump recently began an affordability tour to highlight plans to reduce cost of food, housing, healthcare, and energy. He also tied tariffs to foreign policy initiatives, including pressuring U.S. allies to agree to a U.S. purchase of Greenland. Now, on the right, all sides found coverage from two right outlets. Breitbart challenged the report, emphasizing as enormous underlying variation in the data and flawed methodology when analyzing imports. It noted a discrepancy between cheap and expensive products, suggesting the prices are being driven up by more expensive products as cheap products leave the market due to tariffs. Okay. So conversely, John R. Puri of the National Review on the right emphasized the impact on taxpayers, writing, the purported free lunch of Trump's tariffs is a farce, and Trump has completely ignored this data and is now threatening to punish Americans further by raising taxes on European exports. Now, on the left, outlets on the left emphasized the impact on consumers. Bloomberg called the tariffs a burden and said consumers bear nearly all of the costs. It also quoted Kiel researchers calling the tariffs a consumption tax on Americans and noted exporters' abilities to redirect sales to other markets so they don't foot much of the bill, right? In the time that leans left, contextualized a report within tariffs during Trump's second term and recent threats over Greenland. Now, what I find interesting about the whole tariff conversation is there used to be a time when our country lived off of tariffs and we did not have income tax, but then the income tax replaced the tariffs. That's interesting. And it depends on how you go about doing the tariffs, right? Because I want to say there was one, I forget which president it was, but he did all the tariffs and it threw off the economy, but it was the way it was done. But there's different types of tariffs. Apparently, there's more than one type. We'll have to get more into it. I have to do some more research on it. But, from what I understood, it was like, okay, we're going to have them pay more taxes. But what's happened is it's like that's, been a burden to the consumer. But here's my thing, alleviate other taxes that we have to pay, right? If you're saying, okay, they're going to have to pay the tariffs. We know we're going to have to pay a little bit more because they're supposed to, have these quote unquote tariffs. Okay. Then why are we paying tax on it again? Why are we being triple taxed on goods and service, on goods, pretty much? So, I'm hoping that they figure this out and get it right because we are so overtaxed in America. It's really, really crazy. And the last one I wanted to end with before we close out the broadcast for today is that Trump says ICE will make mistakes, and he called Renee's Good death a tragedy. Okay. And they are going to make mistakes. They're human beings, and they are being attacked by people, which is crazy. It's still crazy to me to just know that you've got people out here. They don't want ICE to do their jobs. They don't want the police to do their jobs. But if something happens, they expect law enforcement to fix it. Like, it's a really crazy mindset that's going on out there. So it says that Trump appeared to update his stance on the fatal shooting of the 37-year-old protester Renee Good at the hands of immigration, custom and law enforcement agent Jonathan Ross during a conversational altercation in Minneapolis on January 7th. The president threatened to invoke the Insurrection Act in Minneapolis in response to further ICE protest on Thursday. So, quote, they're going to make mistakes sometimes. ICE is going to be too rough with somebody, or, they're dealing with rough people. They're going to make mistakes sometimes. It can happen. We feel terribly, Trump said at the press conference. I feel horribly when I was told that the young woman had the tragedy. It's a tragedy. It's a horrible thing. Anybody would say it. ICE would say the same thing. But when I learned her parents and her father in particular, I hope he still is, but I don't know, was a tremendous Trump fan. He was all for Trump, loved Trump. I hope he still feels that way. I don't know. It's a hard situation. It just happens, and it's terrible. And so, like I said, like I've been saying, it's very horrible that this person was radicalized to the point where they thought they could just engage with ICE officers to that degree, disobey a lawful order. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. Yeah. And here we are. And it hasn't ramped down. It's gotten worse because since then, they've invaded a church. I showed you videos yesterday where they're attacking people on the streets in their vehicles, pulling people from their cars, beating people on the streets, and following like a mob. I mean, just disgusting and degenerate behavior happening in Minnesota. Governor's not doing anything. As long as you're protesting peacefully, sir, they're not peaceful anymore. You need to have curfews now. Because not only is somebody going to get hurt, it's going to get bad in Minnesota, in my opinion. You need to shut this down. You really, really do. So I'm just going to skip down to the media across the political spectrum noted a potential shift from Trump's initial stance on the shooting. However, people that leans left focused on Trump saying it just happens. And he was quick to defend ICE. And I'll just, I'll link it in the chat. It's sad because people are going to have their opinions of Donald Trump, what he says or what he doesn't say. It's never a good thing for them. But we're hoping for the best, right? We're hoping that at some juncture, this is going to get better. And we definitely are praying for the family of Renee Good and her children that were left behind and her partner. So with that, thank you so much for joining me here on Unfiltered Vision News. And remember, stay well, stay focused, and stay unfiltered. We'll see you in the next one.